to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for joining us today. Get ready to be inspired and motivated to live a high-impact life. Now, here's Rick.
Welcome to the Point of Impact podcast. I'm Rick McDaniel. It's great to have you joining with us again today. We are in the middle of a series of episodes on regrets. No regrets. Focused on the 5 regrets of people who are dying that came up over and over again. And there's one really interesting insight about today's regret, and that every single man that Bronnie Ware ever cared for as a palliative nurse who was dying, this was one of his regrets. So if you're a guy, you want to listen up today, but it applies whether it's men or women. We will get into what the third of the 5 regrets is in just a moment. But before we do that, let me just say something I probably should say more, and that is, hey, if you listen to this podcast, and since season 7, I just got this from my producer, our numbers are very strong in this new season. And so if you're listening and you like it, we appreciate always people writing and saying what they enjoy about the podcast. We always appreciate 5-star ratings that tell people this is a podcast that you should listen to. If you're new to the podcast, maybe even new this season, and you're like, yeah, I started listening with this new season. I like it. I like the stuff that's being covered. Then share it. Share the episodes with other people, and post stuff on social media. We will take it. We will take it. We don't do is nearly the kind of promotion that some sites do. In fact, when we broke into the top 200, that was on a big push in a partnership with Pray.com and the Pray app, who started having the podcast on that app. And that's when we shot up, is because we had some type of promotion, if you would, even though it wasn't like promotion, like spending a bunch of money with marketing. But anyway, we really rely on people sharing word of mouth and sharing on their social channels and talking about it. And we appreciate everyone that does that. Thank you. Hope that you're getting a lot out of this podcast. And as I've said before, and I said not long ago when we started the new season, it's a little different. Most podcasts, a lot of them, it's people being interviewed, and hey, I was just on one. I'm all for it. I have no problem with it at all. That's just not what this podcast is. And this podcast is not also like a long form, couple hours. It's 30 minutes. Everyone's 30 minutes. And it's mostly me speaking on various topics and themes, like we're doing right now with regrets. So if that's something that is of interest to you, I think it is, you wouldn't be listening, but maybe you're new today and this is your first one. And so you're like, all right, so that's what this is about. But if you want to share with your friends, hey, if you just want to listen to something for 30 minutes, it's really interesting, and a lot of different topics are covered, and sometimes they drill down real deep like we are right now with regrets, then this is the podcast for you. All right, one more thing real quick. The book, Maverick Leadership, that I have a chapter in it entitled Inspirational Leadership, that comes out tomorrow, November 1st, on all the major retailer sites, the Barnes & Nobles, the Amazons, the Targets, the Walmarts. Comes out in both a paperback and a softcover edition. You can get either one. But if you are in a leadership role, I think that this book could be super helpful to you. It's various contributors from the military background, from business, and a couple from my side of the nonprofit world, all contributing. And so you get different authors with different perspectives on different aspects of leadership, and you get all in one book. It's pretty sweet. And I got somebody that contacted me recently and like, hey, this sounds really interesting, and want to get the hardcover copy. And I said, hey, it'll be available November 1st. So hope you'll check that out. You can go to maverickleadershipbook.com to the website if you want to learn more about the book and read about different authors. So maverickleadershipbook.com will give you the information that you need. But you should be able to go tomorrow on any of the sites and find the book and be able to order it. All right. So we are into the third of the 5 regrets of the dying. And this is the one where people said they wish they had not worked so much. So you might say they wish they would have had a better, say, work-life balance. And as I said, every male patient expressed this sentiment, that they wish that they could have achieved a better work-life balance and not kind of overdid it on the work. Now listen, achieving balance between work and the rest of your life and your interests, that is not easy. I mean, that is not an easy thing to do. In fact, I would argue that almost anything in life that involves balance is always a challenge. And all you have to do is look at our country right now. You see extreme positions and you see division. It's just hard for people to get into sort of a balanced place and be able to hear, both sides of an argument. And it's difficult. And that's why the Bible has a fascinating piece of wisdom in Proverbs that says a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the word abomination and the word delight, the word abomination is like the strongest word in the Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament of the Bible is written in, strongest negative word, and delight is one of the strongest positive words. So in the Hebrew language, these are as polar opposite, now just watch this, as polar opposite as they could be, and yet in the context of it comes this: a false balance is an abomination. Like God can't stand it, hates it, despises it when we're out of balance, and a just weight when we're in balance, he's so happy about, he's so delighted about. It brings him great happiness and joy when we are in balance. So God hates when we're out of balance, loves when we're in balance. And guess what? It's the same concept for us. You're not going to be happy out of balance, and you will be happy in balance. And certainly when it comes to this thing that people talk a lot about, and you got to remember too, like 20 years ago when this came out, the work-life balance terminology wasn't, say, what it is today, which is why they said they wish I hadn't worked so much. But I think if they had the terminology, I think they would have said, I wish I could have achieved a better work-life balance. That's really what they're getting at, this kind of classic challenge to achieve a work-life balance. So how do you do that? All right, let's explore it today, and let's begin here. You got to get a right perspective about work. Work is not a punishment. Work is a gift from God that he gives us to enjoy. He gives us certain talents and gifts and abilities, and he gives us those that we can use those to make a living, to be able to provide for ourselves. And that is important. And you might think, is that really important to God? Look, just listen, 2 Thessalonians, and just listen to this scripture. Verse 10 starts with verse 10. We gave you this rule: if you don't work, you don't eat. Verse 11. Now we learn that some of you loaf around, don't do any work except the work of the busybody. So listen to verse 12. So for the sake of our Lord Jesus Christ, we ask and beg these people to start working for a living. It's important to work, to do something that is meaningful, profitable, makes a difference. We were created to use our God-given gifts, talents, and abilities to work at a particular job. Here's another way to look at it. Work is our way of partnering with God in running this world that he created. I mean, it's really fascinating when you think of it that way, right? A lot of times we think about, we partner with God in terms of helping people. Yes, absolutely, that's true. Serving people positively, absolutely, 100% accurate, true. But what about the part about work? That's important too. That's another way that we partner with God, is the work that we do, because the work that we do, and you may say, well, my work is, I just work in a factory and we build this stuff. We build the stuff that people need. What are people going to do if they don't have what you build? And it could be something simple. It could be something, the town that I grew up in had a huge paper mill. yeah, guess what? People need paper. The town that my wife grew up in had a huge factory that made cardboard boxes, and especially the kinds of boxes, if you go into any convenience store and there's like, they're selling the Snickers bars and the M&Ms, and they all sit inside of this like rectangular box, right? That, sits on the shelf there. Those boxes were made in the factory that my wife grew up in Massachusetts, in the small town she grew up in, a town I grew up in, Connecticut. A lot of the paper was used for tea bags. So you gotta, it's not the only thing made other kinds of paper, but paper, people want to, they can do it the old-fashioned way, pour the loose leaf and, into the metal strainer thing. Sure, but most people just want to grab a tea bag. Well, somebody's got to make the tea bag, and people enjoy tea. People like candy bars. They got to be sold in order for you to buy them, and the way that they're sold, they got to be displayed. They're in a box. I mean, this is how life works. So, you can say, oh, that's all I do. Well, in the towns that my wife and I grew up in, I also grew up in a town that had the airport. The only airport, major airport between Boston and New York City, was in the town that I grew up in, Bradley International Airport. Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Also was a huge distribution point for the finest supermarkets. So, people need to eat. Somebody's got to run the warehouses that send out all the food. And obviously, people got to get on planes and get where they need to go. These are important jobs. And where I'm from, Hartford, Connecticut, that's a suburb, Windsor Locks, is the insurance capital of the world. The Hartford, Aetna, Travelers, all of them are Hartford, Connecticut-based companies. And so do people need insurance? Yes, of course they do. All I do is I'm an actuary. I just run all these statistical models. Yeah, well, somebody needs to do that so we can figure out how we set rates for insurance. And so jobs are important. And working builds our character through the challenges that we face, the problems that we have to, overcome, the temptations that we experience. Some people work in people-oriented industries, right? My wife's been in dentistry for years, so she's constantly working with people. Other people might work, again, like in a factory setting, or they could, work in a variety of different ways. Of course, remote work is more popular than it's ever been. So some people are not interacting as much as they did, but some people's like my wife, people are coming in all day long because they got problems with their teeth and they need someone to fix them. So there's all sorts of things that, work accomplishes in us, and it really can form our character. It has an obvious, valuable, and important function. So it's good to just start here. We'll get to the other stuff, but let's just start with this understanding, the value of work. That get the right perspective. A work-life balance doesn't mean I don't want to work, or no one was saying I wish I never had a job. They're saying, I wish I didn't work so much. I wish that my job didn't dominate my life and I took time for other things, that I lived in more of a balance. Yeah, you can see how that's a regret. It may be a regret of yours. But we have to start with, in a balance, right, is the value of work, and then the value of, say, leisure, non-work. The word leisure, can mean different things. It might sound like, you're doing nothing, but I'm not using it that way. I'm using it as juxtaposed to work. If you're not working, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing other stuff. It's leisure, but it could be a hobby, it could be time with your family. It could be all kinds of things. So we start that with that understanding. We have a right perspective about the value of work. We're meant to work. God wants us to work. Working develops character. Now, I have done entire episodes, and maybe it's time to do another one sometime, maybe next year, just on the whole, dig in a little deeper into work and the value of work. In fact, just as I'm talking, I'm thinking it's a good idea for next year. All right. Now, What about the other side of it? Well, it's really important to determine your priorities in regards to your job. What's the point, right, of working hard if you can't enjoy what matters most? So in other words, what are your true priorities, and are they actually reflected in your life? In other words, work again is valuable, but what are your priorities, and can you get to a place where you are, say, spending more time doing what matters to you outside of work, outside of your job? Now, again, a job is very important. And for many people, it's at the top of their list of priorities, but they generally have other priorities as well. And being able to find a way to balance those out is so important, but it does require you to actually have a greater understanding of what your priorities are. Can you get to that place? Like, think about it this way. What commitment, or maybe two, could you drop that would, say, give you more, say, family or leisure time? Like, is there something in the way in which you are doing your job that you're spending too much time, and if you were to cut that out of your work, you'd have more time for your priorities? Now, some of you may say, hey, I don't have the authority to do that. I'm not in that type of job. I understand that. But I would say that you're probably not the person who's yet at the place of struggling with work-life balance. Generally speaking, that happens when you take on more responsibility. You end up working harder and longer hours than maybe you originally planned. When I started a church from scratch, for instance, I had a very young family, but that was an enormous job that took a lot of hours. So the idea of cutting out a commitment or two, not as possible in those earlier days. But then as I got a staff and a larger and larger staff, then I was able to do that. So that's what I'm talking about, getting to a place where you look at your life and your work and you say, okay, do I value my personal time as much as my time at work? And again, I'm just telling you that people get to the end of their life, and every single man said this and said, yeah, I wish I wouldn't have worked so much, spent a little more time doing things that I enjoy doing outside of work. So before you say, well, I enjoy my work and so it doesn't bother me. And we'll get to the enjoying your work part in just a moment. But right now, just this idea of like, could you accept help from someone else so that maybe you could get a little more in balance with your job? Do you know that like only 57% of people use their entire vacation? And like, why is that? Why is that? And I think some people, it's like, well, I'm kind of irreplaceable. And I just want to tell you something. No one's irreplaceable. I mean, I started a church, pastored it for 27 years. I mean, I was the guy. It didn't exist before I started it. And I was the part of all the growth and all the buildings, all the stuff. And guess what? I left and it goes on. Like, it's not like it may be hard for your ego, but life will go on without you. So while you're sitting here thinking I'm irreplaceable, the reality is you're not irreplaceable. And so it's silly to kind of keep from going on vacations because, and you may say, well, I can't afford to do it. Well, then hopefully your hard work is giving you the money to do it. But if that's really true, then the art of the staycation has become perfected. And it's amazing, wherever you live, in the country. It's amazing how people don't even take advantage of some of the things that are around them, and that people drive from other parts of the country or fly to do the very things that you could do. So why wouldn't you take advantage of that? So we just have to ask ourselves, what's really keeping us from taking advantage of it? And maybe it isn't even just a vacation. Maybe it's just a day off. Are you taking a day off? The first 5 years, I never took a day off when I started the church. I just worked like crazy. In fact, I worked so hard and so long that I ended up getting pleurisy and pneumonia. So, guy had never been sick in his life. And by the way, never been sick like that since. But I just wore myself out from too much work. So then I started taking a day off, and it makes a huge difference. But maybe it's just take a personal day and you just get out in nature, or you take a personal day and you go fishing, or you play golf, or you do a spa day, or you just read a book you've been wanting to read and just get all engrossed in it. Who knows? But it's important, to just ask yourself, what's going on here? Like, why am I doing this? And I would say, don't let expense, inflated self-importance, or even people guilting you into it, like, oh, you're going to be gone and we're going to have to work more. Well, then when you're gone, I'll have to work more, so it'll all balance out. Everyone should take their vacation, and if you're not wise enough to take your vacation, I'm not going to let you guilt me into taking mine. That doesn't make any sense. So just really looking at your priorities and saying, these are the things that I'd like to do. And I'll just put it in here one more time. Those who've listened to this podcast certainly heard me talk about before, but just the whole idea of getting out there and going places and not waiting until you retire. I just had a guy in the gym literally just yesterday say to me, hey, where's your next place you're going? And I said, oh, I got a place. It's all set up. I'll be going in a couple months. He knows. All of a sudden, you didn't see me for a little bit in the gym. I'm always there every other time, where, knows exactly what's going on. So after a while, I started asking, started telling him, show him a few pictures. But if you wait until you retire to do all this stuff, then maybe you don't have the physical ability to do some of the things you wanted to do. Or you're cramming it all in a way where you're like sensory overload, when you could have, portioned it out over years instead of cramming it into a few years. All right, let's get to the third one here. Find a job you really love. Do you live to work or work to live? This is the classic one, live to work or work to live. And I think it's, again, a false equivalency issue, either or. I don't agree with it. I'm a both and guy. I'm not an either or guy. So I don't think it's either you live to work or you work to live. You do work to live. Like, you do need to work in order to make a living, but also you don't, you in terms of living to work, you're not living to work, but, I have other interests but I do enjoy my job. You can be both, find a job that suits you, in which you can actually enjoy your work. Again, not only the gym yesterday, but I'm coaching this guy, and he was talking about his job and some of the issues that he's facing and fulfillment. And he said, I'd really like to do something like you do, where you really are helping people. And, it's like, yeah, I'm really blessed. I've spent my whole career never really feeling like I was working, because I was doing stuff that helps people, that God put me on this earth to do, to be an inspirer, an encourager, a motivator. That's what I'm here for. And so I've been able to pour my life into that. And so it doesn't feel like a job, if you love what you're doing. So just for instance, where do I start? Okay, let's start here. What do you enjoy? Like numbers, people, words, ideas, details, technology, mechanical, organization. You see how this helps? Just like, I never thought about that. What do I like? Yeah, what do you like? Like, do something like some people like, I can't believe you're an accountant. You just work with numbers all day. How boring. And the people that are into it are like, it's not boring. I love numbers. I'm into it. Yeah, I can't believe you have to work with people all the time. It drives me crazy. I like people. I'm a people person. That's how it should be. I can't believe you got it. You're all into the details and everything. Oh, I just hate the details. I'm a detail-oriented person. I like it. I can't believe you have to do all this stuff that, requires so much organization. I would just hate that. I'm an organized person. I like organization. Right? Just whatever. It doesn't matter what other people like or what their opinion is about it. It only matters what you like and what your opinion is. All right, here's another one then. What work environment? What's like the ideal work environment? Like you like a structured work environment or unstructured? Do you want to be like in a high pressure environment, make it happen, or like a low pressure? Do you want to be in like a competitive situation or non-competitive? And again, it's not a right or wrong thing. Some people are like, I cannot work from home all by myself. I need to get into an office and be around people. Other people say, I don't want to be in this sort of pressure situation where we just have to produce or else, Other people are like, I love the competition. I like the board up there. Here's exactly where everybody ranks. And I like to see my name at the top. All right, here's another aspect of it. What role? You want to be the leader? You want to be a team member? You want to be independent? You want to be a manager? You want to be an assistant? Like, what works for you? And of course, for some, it's a process, right? You start out as a team member, and then you move up into like a management role, and then ultimately you move up into like a leadership role. And then along the way, you'll see what you enjoy more. Independent versus like really part of a team, which one do you, I just really want to count on myself. I don't want to count on teammates, or I love being on a team. I love being a part of it. It's all about what job would you really enjoy doing? Because if you have the right job, the balance will become easier. Now, again, your priorities. What about your leisure, the things that you enjoy doing? Are you making space for those things? Time with your family, time with your friends, time to pursue your hobbies. But if you enjoy your job, generally speaking, it'll make the balance between the other things that you enjoy easier, so that you can work hard and play hard. And that's the way I've approached my life. Like, work hard, yes. Absolutely, but play hard too. Like, when I'm on vacation, I'm not bringing my laptop and looking at it and reading emails and returning phone calls. No, I'm out now. When I'm with my family, I'm with my family. When I'm with work, I'm with work. And it's easier to do that when you have priorities and when you have a job that you love, but you also understand that you can disconnect from it. What you don't want to be is the kind of person that comes to the end of their life and basically says, I screwed this whole thing up. I spent way too much time working and did not pursue other interests of mine. So I never went places I wanted to go, did things I wanted to do, never developed the hobby that I wanted to develop, never spent the time I wanted to spend with my family, and now it's too late. You don't want to have those regrets. So the time to start working on the work-life balance is now. It's today. to start working on that, asking yourself these questions, determining your priorities, and figuring out how you can make it happen. And you can. It can be done. Where there's a will, there's a way. You got to have the will, and God will make a way and show you how to do it. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode.